After returning from Afghanistan, veteran medic Grace Parker tries to start a new life in a small town, working as a waitress despite deep physical and emotional scars. She faces daily humiliation and indifference until one boy recognizes her heroism and changes the course of events. Her story is shared across the country, inspiring other veterans and leading to the creation of a military assistance center. Welcome to my channel. They call me Grace Parker now. I'm 36. 3 years ago, I was Staff Sergeant Grace Parker, field medic with the 2nd Battalion in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 2 tours, 17 medevac runs under fire, 1 IED blast that changed everything. These days, I wear a name tag with a cartoon chicken on it. Cluckin' delicious, where every day's a Friday. I clock in at 6:30 a.m. sharp, my apron ironed, my scars covered only by the thinning makeup I gave up caring about months ago. I live in Ashford, a town so small the Walmart closes early on Sundays. When I got back stateside, I figured I'd be back in logistics or maybe teaching emergency response. Instead, every interview ended the same way, polite nods, sudden disinterest the second they saw me in person. My right cheek's a road map of pinkish scar tissue, my neck a patchwork quilt of skin grafts. Some folks look at me and see survival. Others see a horror story they don't want near their customers. After 6 months of rejection, Cluckin' Delicious was the only place that said yes. It's run by Connie, a woman who wears rhinestone crosses and judges people based on their handshake and Sunday attendance. But she signs the checks, so I smile and I serve, and I keep my head down. Sundays are the worst. That's when the church crowd rolls in like clockwork, dresses, pearls, starched collars, and all. They talk about forgiveness with mouths full of biscuits and gravy, then flinch when I set down their plates. Last Sunday, I was working the brunch rush. My left hand balanced a tray of hash browns, scrambled eggs, and sausage patties, while my right gripped a jug of orange juice. I was moving fast but smooth, just the way I'd trained myself, efficient, quiet, invisible. As I leaned in to serve a plate to an elderly couple at table 3, I caught it, 2 women whispering at the next booth, their eyes glued to my face. Why would they let someone like that work here? One hissed. I can't even eat, the other replied, pretending to gag into her napkin. My hand trembled. Just a little. Enough to send a ripple through the pitcher. I turned away without a word. That's my superpower now, silence. Nobody gets to see me crack. From behind the counter, Connie watched the exchange. I hoped for a nod of support, a wink, anything. Instead, she frowned like I was the problem. Like it was my face's fault for being born into daylight. Then came the kid. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, walking past with his mother. He stopped, pointed right at me and asked, "Mom, what's wrong with that lady's face?" The mom yanked his arm so fast it made him stumble. "Don't stare," she scolded. "It's rude to look at people like that." I smiled. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what you do in customer service. I focused on my breathing, like my therapist taught me. In through the nose for 4, out through the mouth for 6. That rhythm had gotten me through a firefight in Kandahar. It would get me through Cluckin' Sunday brunch in Ashford. Table 7's orders up, the line cook called. I picked up the plates and adjusted the tiny American flag pin on my apron. It was the only visible sign of my service I still wore. Most people never noticed. At table 5, a man waved impatiently. "Coffee over here, please." When I walked over with the pot, he looked up, then recoiled like I'd slapped him. His smile evaporated. He muttered something to his wife. She laughed nervously. I just kept pouring. When the lull came, I ducked into the restroom. I splashed cold water on my face and stared into the mirror. The scars tugged at the edge of my eye, warped the corner of my mouth. They didn't look like pain to me anymore. They looked like proof. But the world hadn't caught up to that thinking. When I came back out, I noticed a teenage boy at table 9 watching me. Not staring at the scars. Looking me in the eye. That got my attention. He placed a hand over his heart. Just for a second. I hadn't seen that gesture in years, not since my unit's last memorial service. It stopped me cold. I didn't know yet that he was going to change everything. The boy's name was Jason. I didn't know that then, of course. Back then, he was just the quiet kid with sharp eyes and a gravity beyond his years. The way he looked at me that day, like he saw me, it threw me off. Most people look at the scars, the patchy skin, the past. Jason looked into the now. I got back to my tables. The church crowd was at full volume, clinking silverware and gossiping with polished conviction. You'd think they were auditioning for sainthood, the way they went on about community and charity. Until I walked by, and the room dipped 3 degrees in temperature. Melissa, the only other server on duty, started pulling tables from my section into hers. At first, I thought it was a fluke. Then she sidled up next to me by the coffee machine. "Table 4 needs a refill," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But maybe I should take it." They, seemed particular. I knew what that meant. They didn't want me. Not with my face. Not with my history written in scars. "I can handle it," I said, keeping my voice level. I grabbed the pot and walked over. Table 4 was a group of retirees in matching golf polos. The man at the end looked up at me and didn't bother hiding his disgust. "Isn't there someone normal who can bring our food?" I blinked. Just once. That's how long it took for the words to hit. I've been shot at, stitched up a man with a collapsed lung using duct tape and a straw, and carried a 180-pound Marine a quarter-mile on a busted knee. But that comment stung worse than shrapnel. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir," I said, voice steady despite the lump forming in my throat. "I'll see if someone else can assist you." His wife, a woman with carefully sprayed curls and a glimmering diamond necklace, added, "We're just trying to eat, you know. It's distracting. Distracting. That's what I was now. A hazard to digestion." I nodded and backed away, made it exactly 7 steps before I had to duck into the kitchen. Connie was waiting for me behind the counter. She wasn't smiling. "Grace, honey," she started. "Can I have a word?" Her office smelled like cigarettes and pine sol. She fidgeted with receipts, eyes darting anywhere but at me. "I appreciate your work ethic. I really do," she said. "But if customers are uncomfortable..." "You want me off the floor," I said for her. "Maybe just kitchen duty. Or swing shifts. Less traffic. You understand, right? It's not personal. It's always personal. That's the part people never get." I nodded. "I'll finish my shift." Back in the dining room, Jason was still there. Still watching. Table 8 had a bunch of business casual types, laughing too loud and tipping too little. One of them spotted me and nudged his buddy. "Hey, Jim," he said, voice raised. "Remember that horror movie we watched last week? The one with the burn victim?" He jerked his head toward me and snorted. His table howled with laughter. I didn't flinch. Didn't stop. Just refilled a water glass like I didn't hear a word. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my face got this way because I pulled 2 men out of a burning MRAP after a second IED went off. That while I was on fire, I wrapped my arms around a wounded private to shield him from the blast. That my report said, "Extraordinary valor under hostile fire," and the medals they mailed me still sit in a shoebox under my bed. None of that mattered. Not to them. Jason stood up. Just for a second. His mom placed a hand on his arm, and he sat down again. But his eyes stayed locked on mine. He knew something. I could feel it. Melissa kept circling my section like a vulture, taking any table that so much as blinked in my direction. The cooks whispered when they thought I wasn't looking. Connie avoided eye contact altogether. Then table 10 rolled in. For guys in golf attire. Loud, obnoxious, loaded with entitlement. I barely had time to drop menus before one of them barked, "Hey, Scarface, can we get some service over here?" More laughter. I smiled. "Welcome to Cluckin' Delicious. What can I get for you today?" Another man squinted at me, then grinned. "What happened to your face? Bar fight? Car wreck?" I ignored him. "Our pancake special comes with..." "I asked you a question," he said, leaning in. "What's wrong with your face?" The diner quieted. People stopped mid-bite. I kept my voice low. "I was injured while serving overseas." The third guy laughed. "What, dropped a frying pan on yourself?" No way they let women into combat. I turned to leave, but one of them knocked over his glass, sending water everywhere. "Oops," he said. "Look what you made me do." That was it. I bent to clean it up. My hands shook. Then Connie's voice rang out across the diner. "Grace. Clock out. Now." I froze. "I'm sorry." I asked. "This just isn't working," she said. "You're making people uncomfortable. You're firing me because of how I look?" "I'm firing you because customers are complaining." Nobody stood up for me. Not Melissa. Not the cooks. Not the regulars who had eaten my food for months. But Jason did. He stood up and walked straight to the middle of the diner. His voice cracked a little, but it was loud enough to carry. "She saved my father's life. Twice." The whole diner froze. You could have heard a toothpick drop. Jason stood there in his faded hoodie and sneakers, the hum of the overhead lights the only sound breaking the silence. His voice, a little shaky but strong enough to carry, cut through the tension like a rescue flare in the night. "She saved my father's life. Twice." My breath hitched. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded photograph. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it and held it up. "This is my dad," he said, turning so the nearest tables could see. "Captain Evan Ramirez, 75th Ranger Regiment. That's him in this photo, and that's her, Sergeant Grace Parker." He turned to me and then back to the crowd. "My dad used to tell me stories about her," he continued. "He said during their second deployment, when their convoy got hit, he thought he was going to die in that Humvee. Fire everywhere. Smoke so thick he couldn't breathe. Then she appeared, dragged him out, half on fire herself. He swallowed hard, then looked at the man who'd mocked me just moments before. 'You ever save a life while you were burning alive?' The man said nothing. Nobody did. My dad said she refused to be medevaced until every single man in their unit was accounted for. 2 broken ribs, third-degree burns, and she still went back into that wreck. Twice." The words clung to the walls of that diner like smoke. Jason stepped closer to me, holding the photo out. I reached for it slowly, my fingers brushing the edges. There it was, me, in full gear, arm around a younger Evan, both of us grinning like fools, dirt-smeared and alive. It had been years since I'd seen that photo. Jason looked up at me with the same brown eyes his father had. He told me if it weren't for you, he wouldn't have made it back. Wouldn't have met my mom. Wouldn't have had me. My knees went weak. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Across the room, an elderly man stood. I recognized him, Mr. Talbot, a retired postman who came in every Thursday for cornbread and chili. He wore a faded Vietnam veteran cap and carried himself with that stiff dignity only old soldiers have. "I served in Nam," he said, his voice gravelly. 45 years ago." He turned to me and raised a trembling hand to his brow in a crisp, deliberate salute. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm sorry for standing silent. That was cowardice." His salute held, unwavering. A woman at a nearby table wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so ashamed," she whispered. Even the 4 golf shirt men who had laughed at me looked stunned. One of them picked up a napkin and began fidgeting with it, no longer able to meet anyone's gaze. Connie stepped out from behind the counter. She looked smaller somehow, her boss energy drained away, replaced by something less certain. "Grace," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't know. I never asked." "No," Jason said, facing her. "You didn't. None of you did. You just looked at her and decided who she was." Then, like something out of a dream, people started standing. Jason's mother first, then Mr. Talbot, then others. Slowly, silently, they rose to their feet. It wasn't noisy. It wasn't performative. It was quiet and deliberate, an unspoken acknowledgement that they had all failed in some small way, and now they saw me, not as a spectacle, but as a person. Applause followed. Tentative at first, then louder. It wasn't for good service. It wasn't for a job well done. It was for seeing me for the first time. The next week, a sign appeared in the window, proudly serving veterans. All are welcome here. My name wasn't mentioned, but the message was clear. I didn't stay much longer after that. The VA contacted me through Jason's dad. They were looking for someone to run communications for their reintegration outreach. "We need folks who know what it means to come home changed," the woman on the phone had said. On my last day, a few regulars left big tips and handwritten notes. Some apologized. Some didn't need to. Connie gave me a small wrapped package. Inside was a painting, a portrait of me in my uniform, apron over body armor, an American flag behind me. "So we never forget what service really looks like," she said. I hugged her. I meant it. Jason and his family came to visit me at the VA center once a week. His father, Captain Ramirez, volunteered with me. We helped other veterans find their footing again. And 6 months later, on Veterans Day, I stood at a high school auditorium behind a podium, facing a crowd of teenagers who knew more about TikTok than tactical evac. Jason introduced me. "Heroes don't always wear uniforms," he said. "Sometimes they wear aprons and bring you sweet tea. Sometimes they carry scars that tell stories of courage most of us will never understand." I touched the tissue along my cheek. Not self-consciously, but proudly. "Scars," I told them, "don't make us ugly. They tell the story of what we survived, sometimes so others could live." Then I looked at Jason, and I remembered how 6 words, from a brave kid with a shaky voice, stopped the world just long enough for it to see the truth. After the assembly, I stood by the door shaking hands with students, teachers, and veterans alike. Most just smiled. A few whispered, "Thank you for your service." But it was the look in their eyes that stuck with me, respect that wasn't forced, but earned. Jason's mother hugged me, a little longer than expected. "You gave me my husband back," she said. "And now, my son has a hero of his own." Captain Ramirez approached next, his limp more noticeable when he walked slowly. He still carried himself like a soldier, broad shoulders, eyes sharp. But there was a softness in his expression I hadn't seen overseas. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." "You deserve this, Grace." "All of it." We stood in silence for a moment. Then he handed me something, a sealed envelope. "I found this in a footlocker," he said. "Never opened it. I think you should read it." Inside was a letter, dated 2 weeks after I got injured. To Sergeant Grace Parker. "If this reaches you, it means you made it out. I hope you did. You always were tougher than the rest of us. I saw what you did out there. The way you pulled Ramirez out when the fire was already crawling up your sleeves. You didn't hesitate. You never did. We joke a lot in this unit, but I want you to know something straight. I owe you my life. And even if you never hear me say it, I'll spend every day trying to earn what you gave me." Signed, Corporal Dean T. Mercer. I sat on a bench outside the auditorium and cried. Not loud, not messy. Just tears that had waited years to fall. Dean Mercer. He hadn't made it home. I held his dog tags in my hand on the flight back. I remember thinking then that I had no right to grieve someone when I got to live, and he didn't. But maybe I did. Maybe that was part of carrying on. That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter sat on my nightstand, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dean's grin, the way he used to hum 80s power ballads on night watch. I saw Ramirez, limping through the smoke, leaning on my shoulder. I saw fire, dust, and light. And I saw the diner. I opened my laptop and clicked into a blank document. Then I started typing. The Diner Diaries, one veteran's story of service and scars. It began as a blog post. I told the whole thing, the whispering churchgoers, the mocking teenagers, the coffee pot shaking in my hand. Jason's words. The salute. The applause. The sign Connie put in the window. The job offer. The letter. I hit publish before I could second-guess myself. Then I went for a walk. By the time I got home, the post had over 8,000 shares. The next morning, a reporter from the local paper called. Then one from the state paper. Then a producer from a morning show. They asked the same questions. Did you expect your story to go viral? Why didn't you speak up sooner? How did you stay so strong? My answers were simple. No, I didn't expect it. I never wanted attention, because it never felt like anyone would listen. And strength doesn't mean not breaking. It means getting back up after you do. The real surprise came a week later. I was at my desk in the VA office, typing up outreach plans, when the receptionist buzzed my line. There's a woman here to see you, she said. Says her name's Karen Myers. I paused. Send her in. Karen had been in my platoon. Logistics. Quiet, brilliant with a map, and deadpan funny. We hadn't seen each other in almost 8 years. When she walked in, we hugged like no time had passed. Her hair was shorter, her jacket newer, but she still had the same sharp eyes and crooked smile. I saw the blog, she said. Then I saw the speech. Grace, Her voice broke, and she laughed through it. I didn't even know how much I needed to hear someone tell the truth like that. We talked for 2 hours. About everything. The deployments. The transition. The guilt. The silence. You ever think we all just disappeared because no one wanted to see us anymore? She asked. I nodded. Or maybe because we didn't want to be seen like this. She leaned back. Well, they're seeing us now. Karen signed up as a volunteer right there. She started working the phones, connecting vets with therapists, job training, housing services. She was relentless, compassionate, a force of nature. Word spread. Others came. A Marine named Travis, who'd been sleeping in his car. A Navy corpsman named Elise, who hadn't spoken to anyone in months. An Air Force mechanic named Jay, who hadn't known how to ask for help. We built something. Not just a program. A family. All because a teenage boy stood up in a diner and said 6 words that shattered a wall built from years of shame and silence. 2 months after that day at the diner, the ripple effect started to take shape, quietly at first, then with the force of a wave that couldn't be ignored. Veterans from all over Tennessee started reaching out to the outreach office. Not because of some official announcement, but because word had spread. They'd read the blog. They'd seen the clip from the school assembly, where Jason stood with his shoulders squared and his voice shaking. She saved my father's life. Twice. It became a sort of unofficial rallying cry in online forums and veteran groups. It wasn't just about me, it was about what we all carried, and how badly we needed someone to say it mattered. One morning, we opened the office to find a line stretching down the sidewalk. Karen and I brewed the strongest pot of coffee we could, pushed 2 desks into the lobby, and turned our waiting area into an intake station. We had 35 new walk-ins that week. Some needed job leads. Others just needed to talk. A few just wanted to sit quietly in a space where they didn't have to explain the scars no one could see. That's when we decided to build the wall. Not a real one, not brick and mortar. This was something else. We cleared out a hallway in the outreach center, put up a corkboard that stretched 12 feet. I pinned the photo Jason had given me in the center, me and Captain Ramirez, dusty and alive. Then Karen added one of her unit in Kandahar. Travis brought in a faded picture of his squad by a CH-47, mid-laugh. And then they kept coming. Photos, medals, letters, dog tags, patches, crayon drawings from kids who'd never met their military parent, but colored flags anyway. We called it the Wall of Echoes, because that's what it felt like, voices coming back to life. Proof we'd been there, that we mattered. One day, a woman walked in holding a folded flag against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her name was Rachel. Her husband had died during a humanitarian mission in Mosul. She'd never remarried, never talked about it publicly. But she'd read my story, seen the wall, and asked if she could leave a photo of him there. He never got to come home, she whispered. But maybe here, he can rest. I pinned the photo beside mine. Then I took Rachel's hand, and we just stood there. No words. None were needed. Connie from the diner stopped by that afternoon. I hadn't seen her since my last shift. She looked smaller in plain clothes, like the armor of her restaurant persona had been shed. I've been following everything, she said. Didn't expect to feel proud. But I do. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a donation check and a note in her neat, blocky handwriting. For the ones who were invisible, until we learned to see. I hugged her. She didn't pull away. That same day, Jason came to visit. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe just standing straighter. He brought a few friends from school. They wanted to help. Pass out flyers, run errands, stack chairs, anything. You think they'll listen to kids like us? One asked. They listened to Jason, I said. That's how all this started. That week, Jason's story was picked up by a national podcast about unexpected heroes. He told it straight, no dramatics. Just the truth. How he saw a woman who looked like everyone wanted her gone, and how he recognized her from a photo on his dad's mantle. How he spoke up when nobody else did. The podcast ended with him saying, sometimes it's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the one who speaks when silence is safest. That quote went viral. It ended up on t-shirts, bumper stickers, even a mural on a community center wall in Knoxville. One afternoon, as I was locking up the office, Jason walked beside me. Grace, he asked. Yeah. Do you ever regret not fighting back sooner? I paused. Every day, I said honestly. And also, not at all. He didn't understand at first. Most people don't. I mean, I continued, part of me wishes I'd spoken up years ago. Made noise. Demanded better. But if I had, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe you wouldn't have said those 6 words. Maybe the wall wouldn't exist. So yeah, I regret the silence. But I'm grateful for the moment it ended. He nodded. Thoughtful. He'd grow up to be something fierce. I could see it already. As we parted ways, he looked back and said, I think you made more noise with silence than most people do shouting. That one stayed with me. That night, I went home, turned off all the lights, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I studied the scars like I was seeing them for the first time. And I whispered to my reflection, you made it. You matter. And you're not hiding anymore. It was a rainy Tuesday when the call came in. A woman named Ellen, a school counselor from 3 counties over, had read my story and asked if I'd speak at her middle school's assembly. These kids don't know anything about real courage, she said. They need to see someone who's lived it. I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't my comfort zone. But something inside me, the same something that had gotten me through combat and coffee pots full of judgment, said yes. That Friday, I stood in a gym that smelled like sweat and floor wax, in front of 300 middle schoolers more interested in their phones than the person at the microphone. Until I spoke. I told them what bravery looks like when nobody claps. What service feels like when the uniform is gone, and you're just trying to make it through a workday without breaking. I kept it short. Honest. Afterward, a boy with glasses too big for his face came up and said, I get bullied for how I look. But you made me feel like maybe that's okay. I wanted to hug him, but I just nodded. Keep showing up. That's enough. When I got back to the VA center, someone had left a package at the door. No return address, just to Sergeant Parker scrawled on the front. Inside was a folded flag, a photo of a man I didn't recognize, and a note. You held the line so people like me could come home. I never got to thank you. This is me doing that now. I stared at it for a long time. Sometimes the gratitude comes too late, but sometimes it comes just in time. The wall of echoes had grown into something far bigger than I expected. What started as a few pinned photos became a living memorial. Families brought in scrapbooks. Strangers dropped off medals, citations, even uniforms. Then came the invitation from the state legislature. They wanted to recognize the outreach center and, specifically, the work I'd done. I didn't care for ceremony, but Karen convinced me. You're not going for you, she said. You're going for every vet who's still being ignored. So I went. They called my name, handed me a certificate, shook my hand. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters asked questions. I answered with what had become my mantra. Courage doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Sometimes it begins there. But it was what happened afterward that stayed with me. A man in a wheelchair rolled up quietly. Mid-50s. He said, you won't remember me, but you patched me up outside that blown-out radio tower in Helmand. I never saw you again. His voice cracked. Until that blog post. I looked at him, really looked. And suddenly I did remember, barely conscious, holding his stomach, blood everywhere. I knelt beside him in the dark. You were humming Sweet Caroline, I said. He laughed and cried at the same time. I'm here because of you, he whispered. Just, thank you. Sometimes, I wondered if the scars were worth it. In that moment, they were. By spring, we'd outgrown the outreach office. Donations had poured in, quiet ones, big ones, anonymous ones. A local contractor, himself a Gulf War vet, offered to renovate a larger space for free. Volunteers painted walls, assembled furniture, wired computers. It was messy, noisy, beautiful work. We reopened with a new name above the door, the Parker Center for Veterans and Families. I didn't vote for the name, but I couldn't stop them either. Jason made the sign himself. One of the first to walk through the new doors was Melissa from the diner. She looked older somehow, more tired. She stood there holding a pie box. I don't know if you even want to see me, she said. I let her in. She set the pie down, hands trembling. I should have said something. That day, I should have stood up. I know, I said. But you're here now. She started to cry. I hugged her. It didn't fix everything, but maybe it didn't need to. Later, Jason brought in a stack of letters from his classmates. Apologies, thank yous, drawings of soldiers with capes. One read, I used to be scared of people with scars. Now I know they mean you fought for someone else. I kept that one. That summer, we added a reading room and a small library. Karen curated it like a museum, shelves full of memoirs, military history, poetry from veterans. But she left one shelf blank. For the ones who are still writing their stories, she said. The day the high school announced a veterans mentorship program, Jason asked if I'd be their first speaker. You're the reason they started it, he said. They just don't know it yet. I agreed, but insisted it be casual, just to sit down in the library with a few kids who cared. 15 showed up, then 20 more. They had questions, notebooks, wide eyes full of curiosity. What's the scariest part of war? One asked. Coming home, I said without thinking. Then I added, and figuring out how to be a person again. They didn't flinch. They leaned in. Jason introduced me the way he always did, simple, honest, powerful. She saved my dad's life. Twice. And she saved mine once, too. Just by being brave enough to stay. One of the students, a shy girl named Callie, approached after the session. My dad's a vet, she said. He never talks about it. But I showed him your blog. He cried for the first time in years. Then he called the VA. Her voice wobbled. Thank you. I walked her back to her friends, and when I sat down again, I realized something. I used to think my war ended when I got stateside. But the truth was, the mission just changed. Now it wasn't about pulling bodies from wreckage. It was about reaching into silence and pulling people back into the light. On the first anniversary of the Parker Center, we held a small ceremony. No speeches, just people gathering to remember, to reconnect, to breathe. Veterans came from across the state. Families brought lawn chairs, kids played tag between flagpoles. In the middle of it all stood the wall of echoes, now encased in glass. We added a new section that day for stories still unfolding. Jason stepped up to the mic, taller now, steadier. He looked around the crowd and said, Service doesn't end when the war does. Sometimes it starts at a diner, with a pitcher of orange juice and a hand that doesn't tremble anymore. He looked at me and smiled. And sometimes, all it takes to change a whole town is 6 words. The applause didn't erupt, it swelled, like something earned, something lived through. Later that night, I sat alone in the reading room, flipping through the scrapbook we kept of every note, every letter, every name pinned to the wall. I touched the photo Jason gave me, the one that started it all. Then I touched the edge of the scar on my cheek. It didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like testimony. Before I turned out the light, I added one last quote to the display case by the front entrance. Courage serves daily. You just have to look close enough to see it. And beneath it, in small print, dedicated to every silent hero, seen at last.